All right, so big preview week here because like we've been talking about with the end of 2024, we have a lot of shows and movies coming out, and two of those shows are pretty big shows. And the first one we're going to talk about here is Skeleton Crew, the newest Star Wars show starring Jude Law and a lot of very cute looking kids that I really hope we'll be able to channel, that Stranger Things kind of energy and have that great chemistry. And we'll see, we'll see. But I'm cautiously optimistic. It's hard because I say I'm cautiously optimistic for almost every single Star Wars show, and then I end up being usually pretty disappointed by most of them. And so we'll see about this one. But that's what this segment is about. We're going to go over 3 hopes that I have for Star Wars Skeleton Crew and 3 predictions that I have for the show. And hopefully, as long as we get a really, just a solid Star Wars show. I'm not expecting the next, Rogue One. I'm not expecting the next Andor or the next, original trilogy level film. I'm hoping for something that's entertaining and that has some heart and that has some solid characters and story. And we'll go over some of my hopes for the show, some specific hopes for the show, I should say, in just a second. So 3 hopes and 3 predictions, as I've been doing with films like Venom and with films like Joker 2. We'll be doing that with Star Wars Skeleton Crew, and then we'll be doing that also with Creature Commandos in just a second. So let's start out with my hopes. These are 3 things that I'm not going to say that are going to, ensure that this is going to be a good show in my eyes, but I think that if they do these 3 things, then I have fairly strong belief that this is going to be one of the better Star Wars shows. So the first one is pretty simple, just a consistent story. And I think it kind of feels weird to say that because have a consistent story, like have a good story. That seems like storytelling, that seems like movie making, show making 101, right? But I think the problem here is that the Star Wars shows have just not been consistent with their narrative storytelling at all. And I even think a show like The Acolyte, and we're not going to talk too much about The Acolyte here, but, I personally didn't hate the show too much, but what I think could have really saved it was just some streamlined storytelling that made sense, right? That had some good logic to it. I think Ahsoka also, good characters, fine characters, really good moments, like the Clone Wars, sequences and flashbacks, but the story just felt odd, and it felt condensed, and it felt stretched out at different times. It just didn't feel right. So having a good story, having a consistent story, episodes 1 through, I don't know how many there are, 8 maybe, and just having a consistent narrative go all the way through, I think will go a long way to making the show a success here for Star Wars. And so there is that. The second hope that I have is that let's not make this too kiddie, if that makes sense. And what I mean by that is let's have kids obviously are the main focus of the show, but let's not have the show be too much, Disney Channel or Cartoon Network. I shouldn't say Cartoon Network, they had some pretty interesting stuff there. I just mean, let's not make this a show that's primarily targeted towards 5-year-olds and 10-year-olds, right? Because I think that that's totally fine to have Star Wars appeal to a wide range, but I'm hoping that this is a show that is not just for kids, but it has kids in it, right? I think that, again, they've talked about this. I think that John Watts has been very intentional in doing something like this, where he's talked about the Goonies as an inspiration and Stranger Things as an inspiration. And I, personally, as a huge fan of Stranger Things, I think that is a great example of having kids in a show, but also having the show just be for everyone. It's a great show. So that's the second hope there. Third hope that I have is just going off of that, good characters and good chemistry. I've said this before in my trailer reactions, but I think that this is a show that is going to be carried. It's going to be made or be broken by the characters. I think that if the kids have good chemistry with one another, again, I go back to the Stranger Things example, Finn Wolfhard, Millie Bobby Brown, Noah Schnapp, Kate Matarazzo, and Caleb McLaughlin, they carry the first season especially. And I think that as long as the kids have good chemistry, as long as Jude Law is kind of that David Harbour Hopper kind of character, I think we're going to be in for a good time, no matter what. So those are my 3 hopes. I'm hoping that if those 3 things happen, then we will get a show that is fairly up there in terms of Star Wars. At least in the sequel trilogy era. Now, in terms of predictions, right, these are not things that I'm necessarily hoping for or wishing or wanting. These are just things that I think will happen. And you can go back on record. We'll talk about it, I'm sure, in the first episode of whether or not these things actually do happen here. But I feel pretty good about the fact that these things will happen, at least as of right now. The first thing is that we will see at least one Mandalorian universe character. I'm not saying this actually as something that I want to see. I don't necessarily think this is a good thing. I just think with the track record of Disney, because this is yet another series that takes place between episode 6 and episode 7, and I don't even know, are there still plans to do a big Mandalorian universe crossover, or is it just going to be Mandalorian and Grogu? Is that it? I don't know. But I think we will see at least one Mando era character in there. I don't know if it's Mando himself. I don't know if it's Luke Skywalker, for all I know. I just have a feeling that we're going to see something like that there. And going off of that, actually, my prediction is that we will see at least one animated character in there. And what I mean by that is one character that originated in either Star Wars Rebels or Star Wars The Clone Wars or something like that. And I don't actually know canonically, is Hondo still alive at this point? I think Hondo would be. Have we seen him in the trailers? I don't know that. If we have, and I'm totally just missing the mark there, then that's on me. But I also just, again, I think that this feels like a place where you can have a character from one of the cartoons show up here, and it would make sense, just like how it made sense that Saw Gerrera showed up in Rogue One and whatnot. So yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense there, in my opinion. And the second thing is actually something that I don't think we're going to get confirmation of for a long while. And I think this show will be renewed for season 2. Just like Ahsoka was, right? I don't think Ahsoka was the most solid Star Wars show. I think it was a little shaky at best, but I think that just based on the potential that the show has, I think that it is a show that could definitely, it has the potential to tell many more stories with these kids in this universe. And whether or not it's successful or not, obviously that's the biggest determining factor. But I think that this is a show that, at least if done well, will have the potential for a season 2, in my opinion. So those are my 3 predictions and 3 hopes for Star Wars Skeleton Crew. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts in the comments down below. What do you guys hope for? What do you guys predict will happen in Skeleton Crew? Let me know in the comments down below.